You guys ever see that Anime Gamers? It's like a silly little rom-com about these gamer boys and gamer girls and their cringy sort of journey through love and relationships. You have the protagonist who's very passionate about games, but he just isn't very good at them. Then you got the, of course, very cute, very talented, very popular main love interest who's heavily sought after in the entire school. One day they meet in a game store because of course they do. And his weird side sort of comes out right in front of her. But instead of being weirded out, she is completely floored by his taste in video games. The show's also got a decent supporting cast and some really fun parodies and cameos from other games. Guilty Gear ends up in the background quite a lot, and video games essentially become like this vehicle for the characters to learn about themselves. In the second episode, our awkward protagonist is trying to be worthy of the main girl, and so he goes outside of his comfort zone. And so he goes to an arcade where he sees his classmate, and he asks his classmate to like help him not be shy and play a game with him. And the game that the protagonist wants to play is
Persona 4 Arena Ultimax.
That was it. That was the only reason I watched that show. I remember playing the first game. Okay, but seriously, go watch Gamers. I remember playing the first game back when it first came out in 2012. By this point in time, there was a bit of a fighting game explosion following Street Fighter 4 and Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and I was just coming off of the high of those games. My friend brought it over to the community center where we all hang out, and I gotta be honest, I wasn't really feeling it. I was more akin to the Capcom games at the time, and I remember scoffing at this one because if I recall, it was one of the first to introduce auto combos. In general, I really didn't see the anime game genre as a fit for me at the time. Most of them either offered way too much or way too little in terms of mechanics, but because I was a fan of Persona, I played it bit by bit between major releases, but overall, I don't really remember much about it because I spent most of my time on other games. Next time I'd see the game was at around 1 on a Nessica cabinet where I discovered the game had been updated quite a bit. At the time, I was playing through Persona 5 and BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle had just reintroduced the Persona 4 cast in the then upcoming game. This was like 2017, I think. So I was inspired to play once again in the hopes it'd give me some footing in the upcoming Cross Tag Battle. But at the time, Dragon Ball and Marvel Infinite were also on their way, so Persona kind of just faded back into obscurity. Nothing wrong with the game, it was just didn't seem worthwhile playing a game that was hard locked onto the then aging PS3. Holy shit, that was a decade ago! It's a decade later, I guess. Capcom fumbles the bag a bit in the mid-2010s. Dragon Ball FighterZ is an insane success and ushers anime fighters into the mainstream. A global catastrophe positions Guilty Gear Strive to be the most viable mainstream fighting game with its rollback netcode implementation. So then ArcSys and SNK retrofit some of their older titles with the same technology, and are now leading the charge where Capcom once stood. And now Persona 4 is back, although if the amount of Persona fans makes that hard to believe, I don't blame you. Yeah, never left, baby! For the time, Arena was considered to be mechanically simpler than its contemporaries. What with its auto combos and lower execution barrier. I remember friends even calling it a watered down BlazBlue. That wasn't the reality, just the perception, mind you. To its credit, the game is looked back on as being a lot more layered than most other in the genre. Maybe it was just my friends having some sort of Capcom elitism. But in the past decade, we've seen fighting games made simpler, but to that end, simple has actually never resulted in a more shallow product. Emergent game design defines this industry, after all. So this puts Persona in a curious position. By now, I feel like discourse around the game is often focused around how complex it is. So let's talk about it. Your character has a total of 2 attacks, a light one and a heavy one. Simple enough. Light attacks are faster, are easier to string together, but don't usually cover a whole lot of distance. The heavy button consists of moves that do more damage and reach further, but often leaves you more open during the wind-up or recovery. Mashing the light attack even allows you to do an auto combo. Just like with every other game, motions and a button will execute a special move unique to your character. Some are projectiles, some extend your pressure, all kinds of functions. So we have normal moves, special moves, and even a combo. Are we off to the races? Not exactly. Notice how I said your character only has 2 attacks.
Persona!
As you've probably already guessed by now, every character in the game has access to a persona with its own respective light, heavy, and special attacks. Your character's character, if you will. For the uncultured, A persona is a manifestation of a character's inner self, and yada yada yada, go play Persona. We don't have time for this. Every persona is unique to its user, and this is where the game really opens up. It's why every character in the game plays so distinctly. The protagonist, Yu, for example, get it? Yu is a bit straightforward with his persona Izanagi, having its own special moves that the player can use as additional offensive tools or to extend combos. While Persona 3's Akihiko can use his persona Caesar to pull in the opponent and continuous pressure. Learning how to use the persona with your character's inherent options is going to be key to getting the upper hand. So it's just more attacks, that's not the same thing as two characters. Au contraire, the personas are a depletable resource. When they're summoned, your opponent can attack them if you're not careful. If they lose all of their hit points, you'll be straight up out of half of your available options. Although results may vary depending on your character. Some rely on their personas a lot more than others. And what version of Show doesn't even have a persona? So that's it. Deplete your opponent's persona energy to set up your endgame. Well, no, actually, there are several other mechanics. A lot of them will be familiar if you've played other Arxis titles. Cancels, bursts, recoveries, an overhead launcher. When you're low on life, the game's comeback mechanic called an awakening kicks in, granting you more meter. This game even added the ability to do a special move or super by holding the light attack button, although I haven't had much use for it yet. In addition, a lot of characters have unique character gimmicks outside their persona. Junpei's gameplay factors into this little baseball minigame where getting 10 runs will activate a huge buff. Naota's main projectile has to be stanced and reloaded like she's actually handling a firearm. Some characters have game plans focused around status ailments. Rize has a motherfucking rhythm minigame in her super. Fighting games are all about finding ways to limit your opponent's options either mechanically or psychologically. And Persona gives you a lot to work with despite its softer demeanor. As I kept playing, it became apparent to me that the game's simplicity works greatly to its benefit. Let's look at Street Fighter for a second. There's an inherent visual clarity to every normal button. We associate the buttons to the actions of the character on screen. But having to take into account an off-screen persona with an already somewhat noisy game might be plexing for the untrained eye, unless they've played JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. In this instance, the control scheme allows pretty quick segue from learning your character's most basic tools to the actual meat and potatoes the game has to offer. Okay, that's the only comparison I'm gonna make to JoJo, okay? It's a niche game comparatively to what has come out since its release. With Evo around the corner and the developers opting for delay-based netcode, I actually don't know if the re-release will last long. Oh wait, never mind, we're good! And with a rollback netcode update coming, I'm fairly certain this game will have its fans for months to come. So should you buy it? Start practicing before the big summer update? Well, to be completely honest, there's plenty of similar games readily available with more population and better netcode. For now. But that's not why you were attracted to this game in the first place. You want to play as your favorite anime waifu. Yeah, I guess we can learn Ragna, but why would I do that when I can be the best at being the best girl Chie? You also might be the type to consume any and all lore and fan service, and yeah, Ultimax has that also. All of this is canon too, so yeah. Cough up the money and start labbing those 50-50 mix-ups, you fucking scrub. I myself couldn't get through the visual novel story mode though. I was basically mashing through text waiting for the next dialogue option or fight. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike visual novels, but Danganronpa this is not. A lot of the monologues are really bland. This wasn't written by the original team that wrote Persona 4, and they're basically being forced to write scenarios where characters are forced to fight each other. So yeah. But for what it's worth, I heard the story does change depending on the dialogue choices you pick, and there's some really fun fan service moments too.
Rivals. They are friends, yet powerful foes.
In my opinion, there's a much better callback to the original game in Golden Arena mode that mimics Persona's RPG aspects. You ascend up a tower of fights with a difficulty of your choosing, gaining levels for your character as you go on that can be distributed to various stat bonuses or to unlock passive abilities. It's a really fun time killer. But you know what would have been really cool? If there was a separate story mode that combined Golden Arena's mechanics with maybe some story. Maybe make it a retelling of Persona 4's major fights. You can upgrade your character and gain new allies as the story goes on, maybe with some text filling in the events between dungeons. Like, come on, the shadow versions of characters are included in this version. And don't give me that bullshit about Atlas and spoilers, like why the hell is Adachi even playable then? So that's Persona 4 Arena in a nutshell. A hell of a good time re-released so that people can enjoy it for years to come. Although it looks like its big netcode update is going to be coming fairly close to the highly anticipated DNF Duel, another Arc System Works fighter. But in any case, if you're a Persona fan and have had any interest in the fighting game genre, I'd give this one a shot. I talked earlier about all the system mechanics, and while that may sound intimidating, you'd be surprised how much it's built to ease players in. There's surprisingly a lot that works at its most basic level. Are you a Persona fan who always wanted to try fighting games? Let me know and I'll see you on the next one.